Hello, everyone. Welcome. We will continue to explore the realities that have been recorded by Jesus as it relates to the end of time. And remember, our goal is to discover what is that awful thing. In this session, I would like for us to consider signs. Signs. That's what I want you to think about. Signs. You know, I think you're familiar with the phrase, the signs of the time, and so on, right? So we're looking at signs. What is a sign would probably be my first question. Well, according to the dictionary, a sign is a marker, a token, or an indication. That's what the dictionary says. That's what a sign is. Well, when I was younger, I was involved with a youth group, a church group called the Pathfinders, and very often, sometimes they will take us out on different excursions and hikes and so on. Well, something interesting is that the leaders are ones we would call master guides. These master guides will go before us and would set markers on the path. In fact, we were supposed to find the destination. We were supposed to follow on to find the destination. And so they would go before us and they would do things. They would make signs. They would break bushes, break sticks, use stones to make an arrow or something. And then we are to follow afterwards. We are to follow these signs to get to the destination. So one essential element in all of this was to be observant. We had to be very observant. We had to be very vigilant as we traveled the path to be able to find the destination. Now, I want us to go back then to understanding what Jesus talked about when he spoke about signs. Okay? In fact, I want us to go back to the passages that talks about the coming of Jesus and to see what they say. And you know them, we've talked about them before. It's Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. All right? So, if we look at these passages, there is the question asked, is it one or maybe three? Well, there are several questions asked, and you can determine. So let's go back and look at what the passages were saying. In fact, if we look at Matthew, I think there was a threefold question in Matthew that was asked. And what I want us to explore and what I want us to see is to see whether or not there was one answer to the threefold question or there were three different answers to the question that was asked. Now, as we explore this, I'm hoping that you will ask for the Spirit's guidance to help you decipher and to understand what Jesus would want us to understand, what Jesus wants us to get from this. Because it's not just a story, it's not just recorded history. There is a purpose to this. And that purpose is that we be ready for the end of the world and for the coming of Christ. Well, let's go and explore. Let's just look at Matthew 24, 1 to 3. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to shew him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be cast down. That's the background. Verse 3. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? All right, so there you have it. Notice the question that they asked, because the background to this, as you have seen, they were so enamored about this temple. They were so, elated about the beauty of this temple, and this temple belonged to them. And so they were showing him. And in the midst of this, Jesus did something that was very, very alarming. He says, do you see all of these stones? Do you see all the beauty of this? Do you see all of these that are before you? I'm going to tell you this. There shall not be one stone left upon another that shall not be destroyed. So Jesus right there and then predicted the destruction of Jerusalem's temple. And so this was concerning to them, and that's why they came back and they asked him this question. Well, this I would say a compound question. It's a threefold question. And here are the three things that they wanted to find out. Tell us, when shall these things be? What things? What you just said, that one stone will not be left upon another. So tell us, when shall this destruction take place? And what shall be the sign of thy coming? And what shall be the sign of the end of the world? Okay, so that's a threefold question that he's dealing with here. And I want you to recognize how he deals with this and the things that he says that they were to examine and the things that he said that they were to look for. In fact, he called them signs. And so remember what I established at the beginning. It is that signs are markers or signs are indicators, right? And you know, signs, markers and indicators are a part of our everyday lives. You know, when we were children, growing up, our loved ones, whoever it was, that if they were sick, there was a marker, there was an indication, and something would tell you that something is not right. Honestly, the very first time in my life that I ever heard someone being sick with a deadly disease and did not know was during the last pandemic that took place on the world. And you know, in fact, the only way that you knew that you were sick was to do a PCR test. And that test would tell whether or not you were sick. So that would be a sign. Okay? All right, fine. Now, back to the signs of his coming, because that's what I want us to explore. This is, I think, is probably the most important thing to understand about what we are looking at here in this chapter of the end of the world, or the signs that we're to look for the end. So remember, in these passages, and as I said, we just read one, but if you look at the others, in these passages, we are answering, or Jesus is answering to that question as to what they should look for as a sign or a marker. They were to look for something that a marker that would indicate that one, Jerusalem's destruction was near, and that two, his coming was near, and that three, the end of the world, or the world is about to end, right? So that is what they're to look for. Now, interestingly, Jesus went on to talk about a whole list of things that will happen. He talks about wars, he talks about commotions and famines and pestilences and earthquakes and all of that. He mentions some things of great importance that some people see this as of great importance, that there will be war and rumors of war and so on. But I don't think that is so great of an importance. In fact, I think he himself says that when you see wars and rumors of wars, the end is not yet. In other words, wars, rumors of wars, commotions, famines, all of these things are not signs, are not the sign. You see what I'm saying? It's not the sign of his coming, or the end of the world, or even the sign of Jerusalem's destruction. Well, I'll tell you, all my life, war has been fought on this world. All my life. In fact, presently, we are now in May of 2024. There are many wars been fought. I mean, Ukraine and Russia, presently, something pending with Iran and Israel and US getting involved and all. So you look at the things that are happening and there's what is happening over there with Israel and Palestine. So a lot is happening even as we speak in Yemen, in Sudan. So a lot is taking place in terms of wars, and that has always been so. There's always been war for as long as I can remember in my own life. Okay? Now, I think Jesus did something that was very interesting. And in fact, I think Luke brings this out more pointedly than the others. He mentions something that I think is of the greatest importance, and that is the persecution of the church. Now, it's interesting that he would bring this up, but I want you to see how Luke mentions this. Because Luke goes down the same list that the others goes down. He talks about the same things that would happen, but he did something. There was a clause that Luke used, and I want you to take a look at what he said. Now, in Luke 21, I want you to examine something with me, and it's starting in verse 11. And great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines, and pestilences, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. But before all these, they shall lay hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. And it shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your hearts not to meditate before what you shall answer. For I will give your mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. And you shall be betrayed by both parents and brethren and king's folks and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put in prison. And he shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. But there shall not an hair of your head perish. In your patience possess ye your souls. It's interesting what we just look at here, because what Luke tries to show is that, because I think he was more precise, a bit more precise in his timing than the others. Because, for example, we were reading how that these things were supposed to take place, and then like in the midst of these things taking place, there is persecution. But not Luke. Luke says, before all these things, which things? Before these verse 11 brought out some other things that the others did not actually bring out. And that's what Luke says here in verse 11. He says that, great earthquakes shall be in diverse places. I think others mentioned, and famines, others mentioned that, and pestilences, they mentioned too. But look at what he says. And fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. I think Luke is the only one that actually mentions this. But he says, but before all these things happen, I suppose, before all these things happen on a greater scale, persecution is going to break out. Now, what I found very interesting is why? Why would persecution break out? You mean that the people of God are just living and you're just going to church, they're not harming anyone, they're not doing anything, and then you're just persecuted for nothing? Or is there something that causes the persecution? That's something to think about, right? I'm sure if you examine the scenarios that are painted, you will come to that point of the cause. You'll come to that point, which I think is the sign. And so I just wanted to give you a little teaser as we go into an understanding of what signs are supposed to be, right? And then we're not looking at the sign. I think the next session we'll be looking at the sign and what the sign was, because that's really what most people miss. In fact, if you just quickly look back at since we're in Luke, let's just go back up here and look at what Luke says in verse 7. He says, verse 7, and they asked him, saying, Master, but when shall these things be, and what sign, singular, will there be when these things shall come to pass? That's what it says there in Luke 21. But if we go backwards and go Mark 13, and if you look at what it says here in verse 4, it says, tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign when all these things shall be fulfilled? So that's an interesting perspective. Tell us what shall be the sign. And if you go back to Matthew again, you can't miss it, because it says very similar to the others in verse 3. Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? So we're looking at two things. One, when will this happen? And what is the sign? Is that right? So remember now, that is the perspective that I want you to keep in mind. When shall these things be? And what shall be the sign? All right? So that's what we're going to be exploring in the next session. And as we explore this and as we look at this, we'll come to that perspective of the sign, right? So remember again, signs are markers. Signs are indicators. And as we look at the signs, as we look at these markers, let's keep in mind that what we're looking for is when, and what's the next one? The sign. So two things. When shall these things be? So the when is important and the sign is important. So let's wrap it up here for today. I really hope that this is will be something that will be a teaser for your mind to explore, because so often we talk about the signs of the times are around us and everybody and I'm thinking, it's not signs, it is sign, singular. So if you're thinking the signs of the time, because look, World War III is on the horizon, right? I mean, everybody is saying World War III, but I'm never alarmed by world wars. Why? Because Jesus said it. Jesus says the end is not yet, or the end is not by and by. So that's the reason. Anyway, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. We look forward and we'll see you in the next one. Much grace.